The first time I met the woman my best friend insisted was perfect for me, I thought fate had finally decided to stop making my life difficult. I had spent years putting work before everything else, convincing myself that success would eventually make the loneliness disappear. Instead, every promotion came with another empty apartment, another quiet weekend, and another reminder that achievements meant very little when there was no one to celebrate them with. I had no idea that one dinner in Seattle, Washington, would collide two completely different parts of my life in a way that would test my integrity, my courage, and my heart. If you believe that kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances can truly change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a positive comment, and subscribe so we can continue bringing you stories that remind us how powerful genuine human connection can be. My name is Nathan, and my closest friend, Aaron, had spent months trying to convince me that his younger sister, Grace, deserved a chance. He wasn't trying to play matchmaker for fun. He simply believed that two stubborn people who had spent too much time hiding behind careers deserved to meet. Grace had recently moved back to Seattle after working with a nonprofit in Colorado, while I had buried myself inside a growing financial consulting firm where deadlines had become my entire personality. Aaron kept telling me that Grace had a way of making people slow down and notice the good things they usually overlooked. I laughed every time he described her because it sounded impossible that someone like that could exist. When we finally met at a small waterfront cafe overlooking Elliott Bay, everything felt surprisingly effortless. Grace wasn't impressed by my job title or interested in expensive restaurants. She asked thoughtful questions, laughed with her whole heart, and noticed details that everyone else ignored. She complimented an elderly couple dancing to music playing from a nearby street performer. She quietly paid for a struggling college student's meal without letting him know. Watching her interact with complete strangers reminded me that kindness wasn't something people talked about. It was something they practiced when no one was paying attention. By the end of the evening, I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't for years. Aaron texted me afterward with a single sentence asking whether he had been right. For once, I didn't tease him. I simply answered yes. A week later, Grace invited me to accompany her to a charity fundraising breakfast because one of her former co-workers had become ill and couldn't attend. She mentioned that several business leaders would be there and thought I might enjoy meeting people outside my usual corporate circle. I happily agreed, believing it would simply be another opportunity to spend time with someone who made the world feel lighter. Everything changed the moment we walked into the ballroom. The event coordinator led us toward the head table where sponsors were gathering. Grace smiled confidently while I adjusted my jacket, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Then the keynote speaker stood up from reviewing his notes, looked directly at me, and his face turned pale before he shook his head with disbelief. The room suddenly felt silent as he stared at us and quietly said, "You've got to be kidding." The man standing there was my boss, Michael. For months, Michael had spoken proudly about his daughter, who worked tirelessly for local charities but preferred staying out of the spotlight. He often showed photographs of family vacations without mentioning names because he valued their privacy. I had never connected those pictures to Grace. Neither of us had known that Michael was her father because she intentionally avoided discussing her family's financial success, wanting people to know her for who she was instead of her last name. My heart sank. Every worst-case scenario rushed through my mind. I imagined Michael believing I had somehow pursued his daughter to impress him or gain an advantage at work. Years of earning his trust suddenly felt fragile. Before I could explain anything, Grace stepped forward with remarkable calm. She gently told her father the truth. She explained that Aaron had introduced us without either of us realizing the family connection. She admitted that she had purposely kept her family background private because she wanted relationships built on honesty instead of assumptions. She looked at her father with quiet confidence and reminded him that character mattered far more than appearances. Michael remained silent for several long moments. Those seconds felt longer than my entire career. Finally, his expression softened. He looked at me and admitted that he wasn't worried about my intentions because of what he had seen inside the office over the years. He reminded everyone gathered nearby that I had always treated coworkers with respect, volunteered for difficult assignments without seeking recognition, and quietly mentored new employees who struggled. He smiled at Grace and said that perhaps life had introduced us exactly the way it was supposed to. Instead of judging us, he thanked Aaron for caring enough about both of us to bring us together. Relief washed over me so powerfully that I almost laughed. More importantly, I realized that Grace had never needed her father's reputation to define her. She had built her own life through compassion, humility, and service. Watching Michael proudly recognize that reminded me that the strongest families don't measure success by wealth or influence but by the values they pass from one generation to the next. Over the following months, my relationship with Grace continued to grow, not because everything suddenly became easy, but because we learned to face uncertainty together. She encouraged me to leave the office earlier so we could volunteer at community food drives. I helped her organize financial workshops for struggling families trying to rebuild after difficult seasons. Together we discovered that love isn't created through dramatic moments alone. It grows through ordinary acts of patience, trust, encouragement, and showing up when it matters most. If this story has touched your heart or reminded you that unexpected moments can become life's greatest blessings, please support this video by liking it, sharing it with others, and subscribing so more people can discover stories filled with hope and encouragement. Before we reach the end, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling us about a surprising moment that completely changed the direction of your life, because your experience might inspire someone else who needs hope today. Looking back now, I no longer remember the fear I felt when my boss looked up in disbelief. What stays with me is everything that happened afterward. One friend's simple act of kindness led to a relationship built on honesty instead of status, compassion instead of pride, and faith instead of fear. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as impossible coincidences, reminding us that when we choose integrity, patience, and kindness, life has a remarkable way of bringing the right people together exactly when they are needed most.